With Summer League over, we're opening up the mailbag to answer your questions. Is the Kyle Lowry trade a mistake? Who is the answer at power forward for Miami? And what would you do differently if you could redo Miami's offseason? We'll answer that and more on today's edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a late Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be watching or listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. We've got a great mailbag episode. So many of you sending in questions via email, Twitter, and so much more about this offseason, what you could do differently. And we'll start off with a question about Kyle Lowry that I think deserves a lot of discussion, to be honest with you. But before we do that, Wes, I just want to say I want to provide a little bit of a rebuttal to a point you just made on an episode that you posted online regarding whether or not the Miami Heat should include Bam Adebayo in a trade for Kevin Durant. And I think I speak for a lot of Heat fans when the answer is clearly no. I can't wrap my mind around it. I'm sorry. I just don't think there's any way that you can include Bam Adebayo in a case for Kevin Durant. As good a player as he is, you cannot trade the centerpiece of your future, the cornerstone here that you've made so many, promises to, that you've signed to a long-term contract, et cetera. I can't see it.
That's my bottom line too. The more, I tried to make the case for, tried to make the case against. And look, if Brooklyn called and said, we want Bam Adebayo for Kevin Durant, and with whatever other pieces to make it work, if you're the Heat's front office, you have to have a meeting about it. But ultimately, I come down to the same place you do. You can't trade Bam, not just because he's the future of your franchise, and that is a big part of it, but because if you trade for Kevin Durant and you don't have Bam Adebayo on the roster, I don't think that team is good enough to win the finals. I don't.
That's right.
And if it's not, the opportunity to tinker around the edges of that roster and get it to become a finals favorite, that window is really small. Like, Durant is 34 years old. Jimmy Butler is not getting any younger, so you don't have all this time to sort of tweak that roster. It would have to be an immediate rebuild. And at this point in the offseason, I just don't think that's doable. So I spent 15 minutes. If you haven't seen the show, it's on YouTube. It's in the podcast feed, basically kind of looking at both sides of it. But it just doesn't seem feasible, which is why I think the Heat have been reluctant to include Bam Adebayo so far.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Well, let's get back to our mailbag then. This one comes in from Michael Rucker. He writes in, I'm a South Carolina native and a lifelong Miami Heat fan. I wanted to bring this up, and I hope it makes the pod because I believe it's a genuine good point. Are we going to discuss how the trade for Kyle Lowry was potentially a mistake? Because right now the team is in a situation where we are in desperate need of a power forward. Precious Achiuwa has shown to be a promising and talented young pro with a really smooth jumper, and he even has three-point range. Also, we need to ask ourselves, how much better is Kyle Lowry than Goran Dragic right now? To me, the trade hasn't seemed to be worth it. I would rather have Precious Achiuwa and number 7 on the team right now than Kyle Lowry alone. That is a bomb drop, and kind of ties into something that we talked about in our last episode, where I wound up becoming a huge Kyle Lowry apologist. I'm not sure if that's the right term for it, or what I was saying.
That's right.
I just think that everybody's kind of turned on Kyle. Like last year, he was the coup of free agency. He was the biggest name out in the market, and Miami pulled the rug under from Dallas, New Orleans, Chicago, everybody else, and said, no, this is our guy. We got Jimmy Butler in this roster. He's the perfect complement there. And now a year later, everybody's like, trade that 36-year-old bum off my team. I cannot stand aside of him. And I think everything's turned around way too quickly because we're forgetting exactly why the acquisition for Lowry was necessary in the first place. Year before that, Miami's backcourt was roasted in 4 games by Drew Holiday. And it became incredibly obvious that their perimeter defense needed some improvement. So they went out and got PJ Tucker, and then they got an excellent point of attack defender in Kyle Lowry. And I still think even at 36, he's a far better defender than Goran Dragic has ever been, even in his younger days. And I think there was a reason why he was one of the league leaders in charges drawn, if not the
league
league
leader.
leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he's still going to be an impactful player on defense next season. We've seen him get in great shape. And while a lot of that is overblown and a lot of people want to talk about Lowry's weight and things of that sort, I still think he's going to be a little bit healthier, a little bit in better shape. And I still think he's going to be a great impact player defensively. So right off the bat, Michael, I don't think the Kyle Lowry trade is worse than having Precious Achiuwa, who I still think is extremely overrated and might be able to carve out some minutes here and there in that Toronto Raptor, but he's not a significant contributor moving forward. And I don't think he's a huge upgrade over any other option that Miami has available to them at the 4 right now. I'm just not a believer in Precious Achiuwa, never have been. I like the idea of saying, you can have multi-talented players, versatile players like Bam Adebayo. Achiuwa, I think he's a little too raw. I still think he's going to be a little too raw next year. And as much as I appreciate Goran Dragic's contributions for the team, I think he's not a confident enough player at this point in his career where he can be the contributor that Lowry is expected to be and was last year for most of the season.
First of all, I think you're right about the sort of public sentiment going against Kyle Lowry being too overblown, and shocked that on Twitter, like, the nuance in things is lost. Like, who would have thought? But it's possible to be disappointed with Kyle Lowry's first season in Miami, but him also not be #washed. Like, those two things could be the same. Like, I was disappointed in Kyle Lowry's first season. I also think he's still a very good player. And I think this year 2 in Miami will be better than what year 1 was. For all of the things that we've talked about ad nauseum, we don't have to go into it more. I think there's going to be a better Kyle Lowry on the other side of this. And that's fine. I'm with you. Look, they not only did they have to replace Goran Dragic, but they ended up replacing Duncan Robinson in that backcourt because everything had to be about point of attack backcourt defense. They went with Max Strus, who is a stouter defender than Duncan Robinson was. So they ended up replacing not just Goran Dragic, but also the other guy in Duncan Robinson. Tyler Herro couldn't start games because of the issues that he has defensively. So that's the priority for this team. And you make a very good point. Like, Lowry, even now, is so much better of a defender than Goran Dragic is. And we've even heard Dragic go out publicly talking about, why he took the Chicago Bulls offer this offseason, because they were kind of the only team that was offering him 15 to 20 minutes, regularly a night, where even a team like Dallas that has long been wanting Goran Dragic couldn't get to even after they lost Jalen Brunson, couldn't get to the point where they were willing to commit that much time, a regular role, to Goran Dragic. I do not want to get to the side. I don't want to be on the side of bashing Goran Dragic. I don't. He is right now the greatest point guard in Miami Heat history, and I firmly believe that. I don't want to be on the side of bashing him. But right now, Kyle Lowry is the better player for everything that the Heat need. As far as Precious Achiuwa, I am much higher on Precious than you are.
It's hard to not be higher.
Well, I really liked him coming out of the draft. I think his upside is pretty good. Look, I don't think he's going to be an all-star, but I think he's going to be a high-level role player as a center. Ooh. I like his game. I like how it goes with the way that the NBA is going from that center spot. I think he would have been a good fit next to Bam Adebayo. The Heat drafted him for a reason. Okay, they thought that too. But yeah, if you have to sacrifice Precious Achiuwa to get a starting caliber point guard, the way that Kyle Lowry is, and again, you make a good point. He was the belle of the ball last offseason, and all of a sudden now we're acting like, he was just some sort of random point guard that the Heat just gave $30 million to. No, like that, you do that trade. Like I said, Precious Achiuwa isn't a guy that was picked at the end of the lottery that you thought had all-star potential the way that Tyler Herro did. You thought you got him in the middle of the first round as a potential role player, a guy that could potentially pair with Bam Adebayo in the front court, maybe. And there's things that you like, but yeah, I'm not holding on to Precious Achiuwa like at all costs the way that even like I would a Tyler Herro. Like this, it's not the same sort of price. So overall, I think it was a fine trade. I think it'll end up being a good trade in the end. Precious Achiuwa will obviously play longer, and so like 6 years from now, maybe we're looking at Precious Achiuwa and like, boy, would it be nice to have him on the roster? Sure, but let's see how the rest of this Kyle Lowry thing works out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big determining factor to really evaluate Lowry's time with the team is, can they guarantee a championship? If they were able to win a championship over the next 2 seasons where he's under contract, and who knows whether he might play longer beyond that contract, although that seems,
or even if you go to the conference finals twice in a row, if you have deep playoff runs, that's more success. That's a high level of success. Now, I know that Heat fans don't want to hear that. And look, I don't want to hear that either. It should be championship or bust, but If Kyle Lowry is able to get you all the way to the conference finals 2 out of 3 years, that's a very successful tenure.
See, but the argument then is that he didn't do anything to get you to the conference finals last year, and that I don't know what his role would be this year. That he was a player on that roster is the same as saying Omer Yurtseven got you to the conference finals last year, which is to say that he didn't. So I don't know. I think you
get
have
the
to
number one seed, which helped you get to the conference finals. And I know you're playing devil's advocate. I know that you
No.
believe that
I just think I think the only argument that you could say that why people will agree that Lowry is a better choice at this point is if you win a title, because then everything kind of gets painted over with rose-colored glasses, and you see it from that perspective. It's like, oh, we had Lowry in the team, we won a title. Then it's like, it's just it's the confusion that I think is not fair, because I think we're all forgetting like the offense was just at another level when Lowry was at his best, with the look-ahead passes, doing everything on defense, initiating offense, his playmaking ability. I just think that that's all kind of overlooked because there were those large swaths of time during the middle of the regular season where he was out because of personal reasons, and then he got injured in the playoffs, and that was his time to shine. Unfortunately, he didn't have those kinds of moments, although he did step up on occasion. He wasn't also necessary because you had Jimmy Butler playing out of his mind. And if you think that, Kyle at 36 is going to be the complementary player that he was to Kawhi Leonard during the Toronto Raptor championship, I don't think that's necessarily the case moving forward.
Lowry was the third best player on that Raptors team, sometimes second, depending on how Pascal Siakam was playing on that Kawhi championship team. Fred VanVleet too. But I think Kyle Lowry that year was better than VanVleet. Look, there's still 2 more years left on this contract. Let's wait and see. If they win a championship, they win the trade. That's an obvious thing. But that's not like the only way the Heat can win the trade. Let's just see how the next couple of years play out.
All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the power forward spot, because I think that's where a glaring weakness exists right now in Miami's rotation. But we'll also look back at this offseason and wonder what the Heat might have done differently if they could look into their crystal ball. But before we do that, just wanted to tell you a little bit about BetOnline.net, still your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find everything you need to know about the Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell potential trades, where they'll wind up next roster, Miami's win total for next season. I think it's hovering somewhere around 48 games next season. That's what I saw last. But you can find everything you need about any sport, whether it's Major League Baseball, the NHL, boxing, MMA, anything golf even. You can find it all on betonline.net. It's the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news, and it's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. Which NFL stars move the betting line the most? Starting July 18th, Locked On gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline. Available July 18th on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Who's the most valuable Miami Dolphins player?
Tyreek. It's got to be Tyreek Hill, doesn't it? I think it would be. I think Tyreek Hill will probably top the list, the way wide receivers are valued these days.
I think you're probably right. Although I haven't watched the Dolphins game, and I haven't watched a Dolphins game in 4 years, and I've never felt better, baby. I can tell you. You should
watch them this year. They're going to be fun. I don't know if they're going to win.
Okay, I don't want that pressure, man. I do not want that pressure anymore. I used to live and die. The rest of my week sucks after every Dolphins loss, and I said to myself, you know what? I don't want to live that way anymore. After talking to athletes regularly for a living, I also don't want to see one splayed out on the floor of Joe Robbie Stadium, or whatever the hell it's called now, with some kind of major back injury.
30 years since I think it was called Joe Robbie Stadium.
It'll always be Joe Robbie Stadium, Wes. Don't forget.
A lot of fans believe that too.
I know. You're going to call it FTX anytime soon? Because I don't think so. I think
I grew up with it mostly. I remember it as Pro Player Stadium, and I still kind of call it that every once in a while.
Land Shark Stadium.
That doesn't even exist ananymore. Land Shark Stadium wasn't it? Land Shark Stadium for half a season. Didn't even last a full season.
Yeah. Shout out Jimmy Buffett, lifelong Heat fan. Right up there with Michael. Anyway, we'll move on in our mailbag here, because I think a lot of people are looking back at this offseason, and one person sent in via email a good question here. If you could redo this offseason, knowing what we know now, what would you do differently? That is a big time question there. Wes, let's kick it to you first. What do you think?
2 things stand out to me.
Okay.
I would probably have, knowing that PJ Tucker was going to walk away. Now the Heat really, I don't know if they believed that PJ Tucker would come back for less money, and we can debate the less money thing with the state income tax and all that, but I'm not an accountant and I don't play one on a podcast. So we could, I
Yeah,
think
we
that the
do.
Heat,
We talk
I
about the
think
salary cap all the time. That's all we do.
that's true. I think the Heat were probably more hopeful than they probably should have been that maybe PJ would come back for quote unquote less money. So going back, I probably would have tried to address that power forward spot earlier and tried to do something with that $6.5 million portion of the mid-level exception that Miami was able to use without getting hard capped. Maybe tried to use that earlier in the offseason than as opposed to sort of earmarking that amount for PJ Tucker. Now, I'm not necessarily blaming for Miami doing what they did, but knowing what we know now, which is the spirit of the question, yeah, I would have just gone out and started offering that portion of the mid-level to anybody, any power forward that would have taken it, including Otto Porter and some of these other guys that you and I were talking about. Now, I think Otto Porter Jr. would have been a perfect fit. Would Miami have been able to convince him to come here versus going to Toronto, where his wife is from, and obviously he wanted to go and was offering the same amount of money? I don't know. I don't know. But that's probably where I would have started. And then the other part of it too was I know why they gave Dwayne Dedmon $4+ million a year.
Yeah.
But now that we're on the other side of it, it's basically going to limit them probably to only carrying 14 guys on the roster outside of the two-way guys. Would you have gone? Would you have maybe, instead of using his bird rights to give him a nice stackable tradable salary, which at the time I really liked the move, for the record.
Yeah.
But now knowing that you're sort of this close to the luxury tax, and you're without the star that you maybe hoped to get, and still obviously hope to get, would you have given him just the normal veteran minimum and then opened up enough money to get 15 guys on the roster as opposed to only carrying 14? Assuming that the 14th guy will be Udonis Haslem.
Is that second year fully guaranteed?
It is not.
It is not. So you could still waive him before the start of next season, and
yeah, next season. I mean, it doesn't hurt you next season. It's this season where you're basically only with 14 guys as opposed to 15.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I will start off my answer by saying first and foremost that we don't know how this offseason is going to shape up, because I think it could be wonderfully in favor of Miami if they somehow wind up securing Mitchell or Durant, which seems a little less likely at this point than it did even a week ago. But let's just say they're able to pull off the coup of the century, and they're able to acquire that superstar. Yeah, then and you still move forward, and I still feel that way, to be honest with you. Like I think in any other time period, we would look at this offseason retaining Victor Oladipo, retaining Dedmon, retaining Caleb Martin, like bringing back your guys. I think that's viewed as a successful offseason. But somehow we've equated the loss of PJ Tucker and the lack of an acquisition of a superstar as disaster. And I just don't know why we're at that point right now. I don't know why Heat fans are so desperate for that. Because again, you're going to see
because the organization is. Because the front office is, David. That's why.
I know that they always want a superstar. I think they would have wanted.
They want one more now than they did. I think they're desperate for a superstar. I think that is so clear by this team not going into the luxury tax and avoiding the hard cap and letting a guy who they loved in PJ Tucker. That was not just talk. That was legitimate.
PJ was out the door anyway.
For this player.
I don't think it had anything to do with it. I think they could have thrown whatever amount of money and he was out the door anyway. Like he likes Daryl.
If they gave him the full mid-level and hard cap themselves, he would have stayed in Miami, I think.
No,
maybe you're right. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't.
My opinion is. Can I ask you one question though?
Sure.
Would you rather have had Caleb Martin with the $6 million, whatever that they gave him, or a starting caliber power forward to replace PJ Tucker? Like if you were going to redo anything, because you could have still done that and still had all the flexibility you have now to pursue Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, superstar XYZ. Would you have rather just done that? Because I think that's a fair enough starting point.
I am the wrong person to ask for this. I've been consistent.
Caleb.
No, not just Caleb. I like keeping teams together that have good vibes, and to me, that's what this. I've been every time I get
even if they don't have a power forward.
But the other options that much better, like Danilo Gallinari or Bobby Portis, who wasn't going anywhere, and Gallinari wanted to be a Celtic for whatever reason, because they're closer to the title window. I don't think
Gallo wasn't the answer. No, it's a fair point. Gallo wasn't the answer. You're correct. Bobby Portis wasn't ever going anywhere other than Milwaukee. trying to think of the other options. I know our listeners are screaming at us, like some like TJ
Otto
Warren at
Porter,
the
like you
minimum.
mentioned, yeah, TJ Warren, guys like that.
Porter.
It's like maybe those are, you have to move them up a little bit. And Porter wasn't going anywhere than Toronto. I don't think you could have convinced him otherwise.
I know.
I just there weren't a
Yeah, if
lot
he
of
wasn't going to
options.
go back for Golden State, he didn't even take that money to stay in Golden State where he just won a championship. Starting the end of those finals, he clearly wanted to go to Toronto, which cool, good for you, man. But I'm wondering, I don't know.
I have a hard time. Like I feel like maybe part of me is just kind of swinging the other way in terms of like hearing so many people get increasingly frustrated with this offseason. And it's like you got Victor Oladipo, who's probably going to be healthier and
Yeah.
slotted for a much more significant role than he had last year. You're going to get Tyler another year of development. He took a leap last year. He was the sixth man of the year. He's like one of the best scorers in the league. And we're kind of like, to hell with that bump. Like I just like I don't get it. We're getting like Kyle Lowry in quote unquote world class shape. Jimmy Butler is still freaking Jimmy Butler, and all of a sudden this team is like a play-in tournament team. And maybe they were a play-in tournament last year that exceeded expectations, but they were one shot away from the NBA Finals, and I think a realistic chance of having even being able to knock off the Golden State Warriors, as good a team as that was. So I think we're kind of all overreacting to not just the end of last season, but also the start of this offseason too. But here comes another question from Danny along those same lines. Is the 2022 offseason worse than the one in 2020? And having just answered the way I did in the previous question, obviously my feeling is no. And I just think, again, you went to as far as you possibly could. You were almost at the NBA Finals. The year before, 2020, they go to the NBA Finals in the Orlando bubble, which I will never dismiss because I think it was a rigorous, difficult time period, not just for NBA players in the Orlando bubble, but for Americans and people in general dealing with the pandemic and everything else like that. Yeah, definitely not a fluke. So a lot going on there, a lot of stress on everybody at a time between protests and the pandemic in full swing, and I mean just so much doubt and everything else like that. And you're trapped on a resort, sure, in Disney World, yes, but without the kind of comforts of home. And I think that was a very difficult time for them. So they went to this finals, and at the same time, then you're going, oh my God, this is the first year of Jimmy Butler's term here in Miami, tenure in Miami, and it's incredibly successful and all the good vibes. And you're feeling somewhat disappointed because, again, as I've said many times before, if Bam and Goran stay healthy, that's not an issue. Miami wins that championship over the Lakers hands down, and at least in my belief. And knowing you're that close, and then to turn that around and say, "Oh well, you lose Jay Crowder pretty clearly," and then you wind up bringing back Mo Harkless, and
Trevor Ariza.
Trevor Ariza comes back worse than he was. I just sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. What was it? Oh, Avery Bradley, like your other big season acquisition there. I mean, that was much worse. That was just a really that was really tough.
That was worse. Number one, they didn't expect to lose Jay Crowder. I thought they were. I think they were surprised that Phoenix offered Jay Crowder what they offered, and I think that's different than losing PJ Tucker because I think that the Heat were aware that was a possibility, and it kind of felt like in 2020 that they were caught off guard and they responded that way. Like you said, they're like, I don't know, Mo Harkless, Trevor Ariza, like what I don't know, we'll figure out the 4 spot. And they're still kind of doing that now. They're like, oh crap, we don't have PJ Tucker. We weren't really able to get anybody else. So Caleb Martin, here's that full, like, here's the amount of the mid-level we can give you. And let's just hope that you and Jovic and Haywood Highsmith can play some minutes there for us. And so that part of it is similar, but
there's also the Giannis conversation too. I totally forgot. Like the reason why they let Crowder walk was because look, they want to pay him 1 year, and then they wanted to readdress the situation the following season when they had Giannis under their already on the roster.
And that's the biggest difference is that the Giannis thing was never realistic, ever. It was never going to happen because he was never leaving Milwaukee. He was always going to sign that extension. It was a done deal. The Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell stuff feels way more ever
Those
was.
Guys are not playing for Utah.
Ever was. And that's not revisionist, by the way. All the time when that Giannis, I was covering the Warriors and I had to keep writing stories about should the Warriors keep the powder dry for a Giannis thing. And I kept writing. It's not happening. Not because he's not going to the Warriors, because he ain't going anywhere. This stuff feels so much more different, right? Donovan Mitchell, it would be shocking if he was in Utah this time next year. Same with Kevin Durant and Brooklyn. Yeah. So just in that respect, I think this offseason, I would not qualify this offseason as a success. I don't think that that's fair. but I don't think it's fair enough to call it a failure. I just think right now if you were giving it a letter grade, it would be incomplete. I just don't think we're done yet.
TBD, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, good
so
point.
right now, the way that the Heat have managed everything that they have under management, they're in a position to go get maybe Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell, and that to me is much more successful than kind of doing that for no reason 2 years ago for Giannis because it was just never going to happen. They would have been better off that year, kind of
Right.
exhausting their other options than sort of waiting for this pipe dream of Giannis to happen.
Yep. Yeah, and then they threw Myers Leonard a lot of money on a deal that they wound up trading. They threw a lot of money at Goran Dragic too. It was
Similar,
just
the Myers Leonard thing is similar to Oladipo. I mean, both. It's a good question because both off seasons are so similar. It just felt
Mhm.
like this one is sort of building towards something that's realistic, where 2 years ago it was just never really going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, thinking about it now, it was also like a lot of like just it leaves a sour taste in your mouth because again, you get to this point in the finals,
Yeah,
and again with everything going on around you, and then you go to the finals, you're this close, and then injury winds up stealing a championship from you, and then your answer to that is to bring in Mo Harkless and Avery Bradley and Myers at $20 million and Goran at $40 million. It's just like what are you doing? And then you let Crowder, who was such a big part of that run, like when he was shooting 50% from
yeah,
three, unrealistic as that was. And of course, obviously the Suns realized that too, that he wasn't going to be a 50% shooter for the rest of his career. Like he was a good, valuable player and you loved what he brought to the table. And then there's no answer at the four. So I love PJ Tucker similarly to the way that we loved, Jay Crowder. And yet, he seems like he was probably not likely to come back for whatever reason, and you just have to find another answer. But somehow, I guess if you get Kevin Durant, that makes up for a lot of mistakes that they did this offseason. And I think there's still, let's put a pin on it, like you said, an
yes.
incomplete grade for the rest of the offseason. But anyway, we'll look ahead to Miami's glaring hole at the four in the next segment. And you're listening to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Just a reminder, you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. So many of you sending in questions, comments, direct messages, so many different ways of reaching out to us, even leaving comments on YouTube. It's been a phenomenal time. We had so many questions. We had to pick and choose which ones we could answer because you guys were fantastic. So thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Keep reaching out to us during this lean part of the off season too. Oh, and I also want to mention that it's not, we're yes, we are kind of coming up not just with content, but we're not going to fill your airwaves with just needless talk here. We're not we like presenting the news, we like presenting your opinion, and we will give it to you the way we have always done so every day over the rest of the off season. But that's not going to say that we're going to just spend like an hour talking about nonsense. Okay, we're not drumming up content just to fill our time up here. So make sure to please subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts to get your latest edition of Locked On Heat. Let's move on here. This question, it's a trio of questions, all tied around the same thing. This one comes in from Max. He writes in, if Miami misses out on Kevin Durant to play the four, would the Heat look at Marcus Morris or Jay Crowder? This next question comes from Hoops Talk ZA. Is Miami's best option to wait for the season to trade for a power forward, giving enough time for Duncan and Herro to raise their trade value and scope for a potential power forward and star options, since teams at the moment are valuing picks, which we lack? And then a third question we'll get into. So let's get to the first one from Max, then, I
Yeah.
guess. Would the Heat look at Marcus Morris or Jay Crowder?
No. I don't know why these names keep popping up on Heat Twitter. I don't understand it. I don't know why people think that these are actual things that can happen. What is Miami trading? The Clippers really like Marcus Morris. I don't know that I have not heard anything that they're trying to move on from him.
They're not
And
shopping
then
him.
with Jay
They've got
Crowder,
their own title. Yeah, they've got their own title hopes this
the
season.
Clippers are trying to make a move here. Yeah, like
Right.
they're not going to take some young asset in a first round. What do they care about a first round pick? The Clippers, they're going all in
They're
right
winning
now.
Yeah.
And with Crowder, the Suns like Jay Crowder. I don't know why people are so quick to think that the Suns are trying to shop Jay Crowder. And even
Because
if they
of
were,
what's his name, John Gam. I'm butchering the last name.
the
Gamboa
Arizona
or something.
radio guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Gambo,
just don't.
whatever.
I don't know. Okay, let's say even if they are shopping him, the Heat have nothing that the Suns want. Duncan Robinson? No, they don't want that. So no, the answer to this is no, and please stop bringing these two players up. If you think that these are your answers at power forward, you're going to be disappointed if you're a Heat fan. I will put $100 right now, David, that Marcus Morris and Jay Crowder do not play for the Miami Heat the next calendar year. It's not happening. Give up.
Yeah. I would love to see Jay return to Miami. I
Sure.
think he's a great fit. Again, we were talking about the need to bring in PJ Tucker partly because you lost Crowder, and I think
Right.
he's a great fit. I mean, the Marquette connection. He loved his time here. He was happy in that locker room. That locker room was a really, really positive one, and Crowder contributed to it. Even after you wound up trading Dion and James Johnson and everything else, you still wind up having some really nice, players that fit in with Andre Iguodala and Crowder, and I think it was a positive presence here. And yet, I just don't see them moving on from him because again, they've got their own title hopes. They're all in on Kevin Durant, even having lost or retained, DeAndre Ayton. There's still some possibility there for them to bring in Kevin Durant. Unlikely as it seems, but there's some hope there. We'll see how it all plays out. But Crowder probably not going to be traded. And if he gets traded, let's look at it from that perspective. If Crowder gets traded for Durant to Brooklyn, as trade filler or something like that, would the Nets keep him or would they waive
They
him
would
and
keep
then
him.
maybe
No, they would
maybe
keep
keep
him,
him?
or they would flip him somewhere else. But again, like if they try to flip him somewhere else, the Heat don't have anything for them. So,
Yeah. All right.
as far as Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, maybe you're not trading Tyler Hero for a starting power forward. I don't think you're doing that because I don't know if it's not Kevin Durant. I don't know who
Right.
the forward is that makes sense. Maybe there's another one that's out there. It's not John Collins. It's not Miles Turner. It's not like it's not any of the other names that have been bandied about otherwise. Duncan Robinson, I could see that. I actually think Duncan Robinson will have a bounce back year from last year. And if that's the case, the Heat will have his contract until the trade deadline at least, where maybe he does create more trade value,
I
rebuild
don't
his
see
sort of
it
trade
though.
value,
Yeah, I
and
don't see it.
becomes more of a tradable salary somewhere. Maybe there's a team, that loses a 3-point shooter to injury and they need some floor spacing or something like that. There's always that possibility. So if anybody's
Yeah.
going to maybe bounce back some value a little bit, it could be Duncan Robinson. I think
Hmm.
that's possible, but I don't think that you could expect something major in return for Duncan Robinson either. I don't think you're trading Duncan Robinson for Harrison Barnes. You know what I mean? Like all these things that Heat fans want so desperately. I don't see that happening, but maybe there's a 1-for-1 swap that is beneficial for the Heat and another team somewhere down the line. I think it's possible.
Yeah. No, I mean certainly, and that's something we should include always when we're having these trade discussions. It's not that fans or Heat fans specifically are unrealistic. It's just that fans in general are unrealistic. Like they always will tend to overvalue
Mhm.
players in the team that they watch regularly, and assume that any team will be willing to trade their superstar for your 12th guy on your roster. There, that's not likely to happen. I don't know how Duncan improves his trade value. I'd love to see it. I just don't think that's
Just
also
shooting better.
realistic. Yeah, but even if he shoots at 45%, right, like back to where he was before the last season. I mean, how is he going to even get those kind of opportunities? Like I don't
Oh, I
think
don't
he's
know.
going to supplant Max Strus. I mean, you've
No,
got
yeah,
Tyler.
you're right. He needs minutes first. That's his first obstacle is
Yeah,
to get back onto the court. I think in the regular season, when in the playoffs, we saw him off the court. He never lost minutes necessarily in the regular. I mean, he lost his role and he lost a few minutes, but he was always sort of playing. He was part of the night to night rotation in the
yeah,
regular season. So he'll,
yeah.
when you go 11, 12 deep like Spo did last year, yeah, I think Duncan Robinson will see minutes, but it's a good point. Like he needs to get on the floor often and he needs to make the most of those minutes. So
Right.
yeah, like I said, I'm not predicting it. I think it's a tough salary to move right now. There was a report recently like that his value is an unprotected first round pick. I don't know where that came from. What source was telling somebody that? That is not at all what I've heard. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
This last question comes in from King Pusha NFT. Do you think we see Karan Butler suit up at the 4 next to Bam? I would
Yes,
love to see it. Yes, I think
let's make it happen.
I think he comes out of retirement, loses 80 pounds, and gets back in there at age 40 something and starts playing there. I don't know. I might have a better chance of playing power forward than Karan does at this point. No, not really.
Give it
Uh,
a shot. Why not? Maybe. Do you think Karan Butler plays power forward like in scrimmages? I've seen him shoot around with
he's
the
not.
players, but I don't know if he's getting
He's
up and
not.
down in a scrimmage right now.
He's not much smaller than Malik Allen is. Maybe an inch or two. Malik is probably in good enough shape where he could probably get back out there again.
Yeah, he's so
Uh,
big though. You never know with these guys and their knees. Duran has had some injuries too, so I don't know. I don't know what his conditioning is at this point.
Not great. Not
Probably
great,
not great.
probably. Probably not
Yeah.
great. No knock on Karan, please. And I know if you're
No,
listening
no,
to this,
no. I
Karan.
just he had a rough career,
Yeah.
as far as things are concerned. But I'd like
Yeah,
to see
Malik's
him.
probably a better answer, right? I mean, you got a good squad there. I mean, Miami is this Miami's coaching staff aside from Spo, like even
Yes,
including Spo, a college player,
includes
like
Bo. Most athletic, yes,
yeah. I mean, you
probably.
got Quinn still
Boston's is
like
pretty good.
Quinn
Boston's
looks
is
like
pretty
he
good.
hasn't changed from his playing days. AC a little different. Anthony Carter a little different, maybe.
So AC does scrimmage. He'll get out there. So he'll still
Yeah,
move up and down. He'll go up and down the court. Obviously, Chris Quinn. Spo will get out there sometimes, man. You could throw Alonzo Mourning. You still have him in the front office. You could put him out there. Pat Riley,
yeah.
I'm sure, would like to get in on some things.
I,
If
I
there's
think
a front
Pat's.
office pickup game, I would take Miami as a 1 seed, right? Golden State's is really good too. Steve can't get up and down anymore because he's dealing with
No,
the
his
back
back
problems
issues.
and stuff.
Yeah,
But they've got a bunch of guys in their front office that they
yeah,
still have like Zaza Pachulia's out there. Like it hasn't been that long
that's
since he was injuring guys.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, whoa. Shots fired at the former team. Look at that. All right. Well, I guess there goes your access. Uh,
Zaza
anyway,
would laugh at that.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would. All right. Well, that'll do it. We're probably going to have a second mailbag episode coming
Yeah.
up soon with some more of these questions because we've got so many of them. But thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to stay tuned and subscribe so you can get that upcoming mailbag episode. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.